Off again. All right. I always start our podcast with all right, or videos with all right, but it is January 19th, 2024. We're almost like 3 weeks into the new year. And of course, Tesla news never disappoints. We even had our own very own citizen journalist, Jeff, on the ground in Chicago. We'll get into all of that. But thank you for tuning in. And, of course, I love to start these podcasts with quickly looking at the Tesla stock. And so here it's been a rough start. We started, I think the beginning of the year was around 248. And so you've had about a 15 to 20% rundown since then. And, I know people who obviously have a huge investment in Tesla. It's been, for them, as we all see, a lot of people start saying hey, I'm selling. Or, a lot of people, as our infamous Joe would say, would be, this is the time to get in, right? So, but I don't know, any thoughts, real quick, or what would you say to a friend in cases of rundowns like this? And again, not everyone is as weathered as us, who've been watching or following this company all these years.
I usually look at the company and not the noise, and so I like to try and tell people to the fundamentals. Like, Tesla's not changing; they're still producing way more EVs than everybody else. They're still doing so much more innovation is happening, and they're not slowing down while everybody else is pulling back. They're just keep going forward. So I just look at the fundamentals, not the noise.
Yeah, I think Joe's comments are wise, and I just add is when you're talking about financial, I don't actually like giving financial advice out to people, to friends or family, unless they ask for my input on something. And I would start where Joe was at, basically here's the fundamentals and here's the stock. Sometimes they separate at times. This is, if you've been a long-term, shareholder of this company, this kind of variation isn't strange or atypical. But, we've obviously have a big milestone next week in terms of, short-term quarterly reporting. And, that's where you'll get a real update on the company in terms of its profitability and where they see the rest of the year shaping up. And I think that will be a lot more, defining in the short term than some of the, the fudding. The stock has been incredibly fudded the first, 3 weeks of the year. And there's also been some, obviously, self-inflicted noise on the stock as well. So when you have those two things together, it doesn't usually bode well. In the market, the more macro market itself has been choppy, but I would say that from a tech perspective, you think of the QQQs and the NASDAQ, it's flat to slightly up. So when you kind of look at it, Tesla's underperforming to those. So we've seen this divergence before, and we've seen this type of variation before. It's really, it's really going to come down to are those fundamentals still intact, and how will the story be told regarding those fundamentals next week?
Well, I thought we'd take this quick moment and we'll get back to, I wanted to follow up with some of the stuff that Jeff said, but we have a special guest, a new weekly host. We did announce it earlier this week. This person is a face in the space, especially with her knowledge on investing, all things Tesla related, and really just a wide expanse of experience, really, with finance in general, being an analyst over the years. At this point now, she runs her own company, has done a lot of work with Gary Black. So just a real asset in the community, and also on the Cyber Bulls. So we are bringing in Alexandra. How's it going?
Hi, how are you? How are you? Good to be here. My gosh, it's been a journey. And you've seen, I'm trying to be young like you all are.
Well, most importantly, you're wearing swag that Joe made.
by
You should
hand.
feel special.
Exactly. And I got two of
Joe, did you
those. I
sell
got a
that?
green and a beige. Thank you, Joe.
So Alexandra, we would love to get your take. I know you actually, I think you even put out a couple of tweets. Jeff was ending on some thoughts, but there's been a 15 to 20% rundown on the stock since year to date. And we all know, at least some of us, the majority of us, we're long-term holders, and so we're not worried about the run-ups, the rundowns, especially if you've been an investor really over the past 5-6 years. You've seen these crazy run-ups, rundowns. But what would you tell like the average layman about the recent run-up or rundown? Like any reassurance that you would give like the typical I don't know, retail investor or recent investor in Tesla?
Of course. I mean, right. So anybody who wants to be in Tesla with margins, with options or whatever, well, you better know what you're doing. If you want to play with these things, if you want to gamble, know your risks. Everybody else, know your time horizon. If you're in here for 3, 5, 10 years, don't even look at the stock price. I mean, it is a stock where so many interests are coinciding, and Elon has his moods, and the stock market has its moods. At the moment, everybody is so pro Nvidia, right, that nothing compares. The other day, we had a discussion with Gali, who said, yeah, Tesla is the Kim Kardashian. Of course it is. There is also Khloe Kardashian, and there is also Kylie Kardashian. So we're in a competitive environment with other stocks. And in hindsight, always say, "Oh, I wish I would have been now in Nvidia, or I would have done this and that." That doesn't work in the stock market. You better have a conviction. If you believe in Tesla as a company, if you understand the potential it has, this doesn't matter. It's actually good buying opportunities if you have additional money to add, or if this is a moment you're considering getting in, or lots of people have now their retirement money again, for a very good moment to invest. And I mean, I can't give any investment advice, but you have to accept the volatility in Tesla. People don't understand the stock. Lots of the normal people don't understand the stock. When they see price decreases in the cars, they start panicking about margins. I mean, Jeff can explain to us that you need to know more about COGS. You need to know more about the long-term strategy to appreciate. I think we're not done with price decreases, because they want to get these EVs to the most affordable prices, and that comes with price decreases. If you remember, we had the Model X and the Model S at 120,000. Now there is a Model X under 80,000. I mean, this is one for people who are seeing a Model X. I'm thinking about people that are now buying secondhand Model X's. They're getting them at a bargain price. So that helps the EV expansion, where so many of the competitors are not capable of being there, of being present, of having a comparable products. So if you even need term, it should not worry you. It really should not.
Yeah, my feedback would be the same. I mean, great points by Joe, Jeff, and Alexandra. Thanks for chiming in there. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, this, it's always one of those things where, again, this is not financial advice, but if you're thinking, like, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, maybe that's, what they always say is diversify, put your things in multiple buckets versus just all in on Tesla. But there have been some big run-ups on some other big tech companies like the NVIDIAs, and other companies have literally gone down to like a fourth of the price that they are now. But ultimately, this is one company, in my opinion, that is like the Amazon, the bookstore is to Amazon, where now you look at Amazon, they are farthest from being just a bookstore. They're doing pharmaceutical stuff now. They're doing, they're even, investing in car companies to finish the last mile, which is Rivian. This company is pretty much doing everything. And when you look at Tesla, they're still, I think the robo-taxi and even potentially full self-driving or the robot, one of those three is going to be that iPhone moment, kind of like that Apple had, where, because I grew up in the Bay Area, literally down the street from Apple, and I saw this company pretty much go to its last limb. They were selling off buildings, practically didn't exist until they released the first iPod, and that pretty much changed everything. And yet they had, so in a lot of ways, like the Model 3 is kind of like the Mac, the first Macintosh things, right? It's kind of just what they do in volume. But I don't remember exactly who it was, if it was you, Jeff, or someone else. I just remember seeing the iPhone moment is going to be potentially, the robot. It's going to be full self-driving, or it could be one of each. We'll see, so and maybe they have multiple iPhone moments, which is completely possible given, how we all know that this is many startups within one. So I think it's just like, that this company has great fundamentals.
True, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. That's so true, John. There is really no other one of the Mac 7 that has so many multiple startups. I think what is so astonishing with Tesla is you're just wondering now which of the many projects comes through first. And you don't have that. I mean, I understand NVIDIA has their chips and whatever, but you just have the feeling that Tesla, it can come from any side. Now, I wouldn't be out of the stock. I wouldn't want to be that, because I have fear of missing out, because that day can happen any day. That's just the thing. The same way we can go down 5% for no reason, we can suddenly go up 20% for no reason. So it is what it is. You live with volatility. If you don't need to watch the stock price every day, don't go there. And if you need to see it, well, then you better have a good stomach.
Definitely, which gets us into our next topic, which was kind of actually the biggest, probably the topic of the week, and had been something, shout out to the likes of Amy and other people who have been kind of really commenting on Elon getting a new compensation package, and a lot more details have been shared. So excuse the grammatical error here. I meant stiffing here, but the Tesla board hasn't been stiffing Elon Musk on his compensation, but ruling for a court case in Delaware is holding back further discussions by the Tesla board. So sometimes you're just trying to hammer out quick tweets, but let's get into one. I would love to get everyone's just opinion, roundtable on. Should Elon even be getting a new compensation package? Is that outrageous? Do you think you're all about it? And then obviously we all know that, the reason why the board hasn't had these discussions is because there's a court case that it's a Delaware court case about, I think, his previous compensation package that needs to be settled first. And then from there, we can potentially move forward. But who wants to go first?
I'll go first. No,
do it.
I just want to say that the guy's been working like 2 years without being paid. Anybody who would work 2 years without any additional funds, if they were to tell you like, no, you made money last year, you're good, and you don't need any more money or whatever. I mean, for Elon, we know it's not about the money, right? It's just about motivating him to stick with the company and do more things. But yeah, I think I'm all for it. I mean, as a shareholder, I think it's good to keep him motivated. Elon's like one of those type of people that he just goes on to the next thing. You can see already with XAI and all these other things that he has going on, Neuralink and everything like that. He is motivated by the challenges. And if he's not challenged, then, then what? So yeah, I'm all for it. I think it's good. I think I just want to ask you, what's a tweet? You mentioned something about tweeting.
Sorry, I meant a post. I'm still not used to it. Jeff or Alexandra want to step in on the compensation discussion?
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten a lot of discussion this week. It definitely is a topic of the week. I mean, a couple of things. One is I think sometimes people forget that Elon is an employee of Tesla. His title, he has a title, Techno King, CEO. But he's a title. He's a human asset of the company. He's a person, and people have choices that they can make in their lives, and their work, and there's a marketplace for talent in the world, for talent and for time. So like any person in the company, whether it's the CFO, whether it's the VP of engineering of any company, whatever you name it, head of finance, you name it, everybody kind of, there's a value on each person that's kind of assigned to each person, and kind of what could I get in the marketplace. And of course, Elon has a value. It's tremendous value. And to be, in present time working what and not being on an active or new forward-looking milestone-based compensation package, he has a fixed amount of time in his day, in his week, in his years, in his career, right, in terms of what he wants to do and what he wants to accomplish. And he has to figure out, where should I spend the most amount of my time to make the most amount of impact in what I'm doing. So, like any, it's a natural thing. And so we can question the magnitude. Now we know, there's a request for a certain amount of control in terms of voting shares. You can question a number of different attributes and have fair dialogue. I don't think there's one answer to this question, but I think from a matter of process of, in terms of board, corporate governance, and so forth, when you have somebody that's setting the direction for the company, that's so important, so critical, they should be on a new, active, forward-looking compensation plan that I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying that Elon's not motivated today. He has a tremendous piece of the company and he's motivated on the mission, but you should set a new forward-looking plan to motivate people. They should, everybody should be on an active compensation plan. Transparently, I think it's debatable whether this conversation should happen in the public sphere versus, working to get it done. I mean, I think it's a debatable topic. There's litigation that's happening. The company's in a quiet period. I don't think that having that conversation in X, online. I can't. To me, when I think through the logic of it, there's nothing that says to me like that conversation had to be done in the public sphere. If you're critical, so now it's, like, where do we go from here? Like, what can actually happen? Can they agree to terms on things? And I love to turn it over. Can they agree to terms? There's not a, obviously there's not a vote that's going to be, tomorrow. If they come to terms tomorrow, there's not going to be a vote available tomorrow to codify it. So I'd love to turn this over to Alexandra to hear her thoughts on it. But just in quick summary, yes, new compensation package. Yes, forward-looking, milestone-based. Every employee has a value in the marketplace. Everybody has a value for their time, and he should be, compensated for that commensurately.
Maybe one quick question before you go. Should he get 25% control?
The exact percent, should he get 25 or 27 or 23? I think he's got a reason for that. In terms of voting shares. And I can't, if you say, well, who should have, if one person's going to have that, it should be him. But I mean, is it 23? Is it 22? Is it 27? I mean, I have to sit down and go through the math and, go back and forth, but there's, from a voting share perspective, there's some logic behind it. But yeah, to me, it's his, he is worthy of getting greater control of the situation. Everybody can question how we got to this point, but now it's like, where do we go from here? And how do we set the path forward for the company, for the employees, for himself, and for shareholders?
Definitely. Alexandra, you want to chime in?
Yeah, very well summed up, Jeff. And I apologize for my connection. We have really bad weather coming in Santa Barbara, so maybe that's it, but we'll just have to deal with it. You keep me updated if it's really getting too bad. So a couple of things. Of course, he needs a compensation package for free. And whenever I hear somebody saying he's so rich already, or he shouldn't have sold to get Twitter, or he still has options to come, well, excuse me, right? It is what it is. It's not because the guy worked his butt off to get where we are, that now for the rest of his life he has to work for free. I don't take any of that. So of course it's that we need those milestones. I want to hear those milestones. I want to hear whether his Apple and Aramco together with a bigger thesis really comes through. I want something really ambitious and I want him focused on it. And I think everybody wants to do that. The second point I want to make, I think all this drama we had a year ago, hopefully you forgot, but I'm just going to tell you again, with Ross wanting to go on the board and whatever, really pointed out how important it is that he has a strong backing. What's a strong backing? Retail investors and his part. Okay. If retail investors maintain 50%, which is going to be difficult if we dilute, and we will have to dilute to get him to 25%. I mean, don't listen to all this buyback crap. It's always coming from the same corner. But that one episode with Ross tells you how quickly you can have an activist board member that really spoils the whole chemistry. I mean, we've all been to Tesla events. We see the board interact with Elon. This is a really tight-knit group. I'm not saying they're friends. I mean, some of them are probably friends, but my point is they are very focused. Somebody there to spy them out, to be against them, to represent other interests, or what's they focused on that and their mission. So for that, the 25% are important. Why? Because the supermajority is needed for a couple of things, including new director appointments. Supermajority means 66.6%. So if Elon has 25%, that allows retail investors to be around 41%. That is something I think remains sustainable, even if more institutionals come in. So, of course, among the retail investors, there may be some Kogan and Leo and whatever people that may side with the institutionals, but most of the retail investors will always back on his mission. Is very focused with his 25% and important to keep so many institutionals in check. I mean, do remember, I've talked about this so often. Index funds, which so many Americans love and have in their retirement plans or whatever, give the Vanguards of this world, give the BlackRocks of this world the voting power. So you have Vanguard alone that has more than 7% voting power. You have BlackRock that has about the same. So you're already at 14%. And if they, because they usually come, all these institutions, currently around 45%, become proxy firms. So there are 5-6 big proxy firms out there that give the mood, that tell them what to vote. So these guys cling together. If they cling together for some of their crazy ESG goals or I don't know what, we need to be a block on the other side. And the biggest part of that block is going to be Elon's stake. So compensation package, yes. 25%, yes. Now, the question is, how do we get there? Now, how do we get there is actually a good question because I don't think it's in Elon's interest to be there in 10 years. What do I mean? He's currently at 13%. He has about 6-7% options coming up that once they're sold, that's what it is. So it's about 20%, just for sake of patience. Oh, sorry about my camera. So he would need to get quickly 5%. So just putting up a compensation plan like the 2018, where he has goals in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, means that for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, he doesn't have those 5%. So one of the ideas we may want to ponder, or they want to ponder, and we can only talk about it, is Tesla purchasing parts of XAI or Tesla purchasing parts of Starlink. Because by purchasing them, it gives Elon money. And with that money, Elon can purchase more Tesla shares. So that could be a way of getting quicker to those 25%. I still want the compensation plan that gives him all those milestones and all those supplementary options. But I also want him to have an edge on some quicker execution.
No, that's a really good insight. Joe, did you want to chime in?
I chimed in first.
Oh, what am I talking about? So I guess I'll go. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, for myself, I would agree with, I mean, both Jeff, all of you, Alexandra and Joe, gave really good feedback on this, even though I called in Joe last minute. But so yeah, either way, the guy needs to be paid. Obviously, we know that some of these goals, even back when this compensation plan were created, seemed outrageous. nobody expected that he would hit these comp numbers and hit these goals so quickly. And as we've mentioned, it's been 2 years right now. And as Jeff really called out, it's like, we all know that Elon's time is very important. And I think that there's still 2 or 3 big things that Tesla needs to accomplish during his time there, depending on how long that is. And that is going to be accomplishing full self-driving, getting this bot up and running, and potentially getting the robotaxi out. And again, there's a lot of other things that this company will start doing as well. But if you just think of those 2 or 3 things, you need the greatest mind in the world right now to be focused on that. Even if he's not focused on some of the other things, like some of the other operational things like supply chain and finance and budgeting, all that stuff. But you want him focused on solving some of the world's hardest problems. And that's what needs to happen here. And not that he's distracted, but the great thing about him is from what we all know, he's a part of 8 companies now, whatever the number is. He is always focused or laser focused on the things that interest him the most. Like even at X, he's focused on the product and the product features and making it the best platform in general. And at Tesla, he's focused on autopilot and full self-driving and obviously AI, right? SpaceX, it's going to be, building the rockets. So it makes sense to pay the guy, give him some things that are going to keep him engaged, as Alexandra said, especially, 2, 3 years, 4 years from now. It's crazy to think that, in about 10 years, what is he going to be, 63? Does it make sense for him to be there? But that's a different discussion. But definitely over the next 3 to 7 years, we want him laser focused as much as possible. And I personally, the reason I'm invested in the company is because he's running it. With whether you like some of the things he says or not, I'm a huge fan of what he's accomplishing, and the mind to be able to tackle these crazy, insane problems. So that's why I'm invested. I'm not saying ignore all the stuff he says. You're not going to agree with everything he says, but I'm invested in Tesla because yes, it's an amazing company, but it's also because he's leading it. Especially his mind is focused on solving some of these really hard problems. So that's just my opinion. If there's any other feedback, let me know. Otherwise, we can jump into the next topic. Any other thoughts? So the other thing too, that it's crazy to think, I think it was back in 2016. No, sorry, it was probably later than that. Was it 2018, 2019 when they launched the Model Y? And I remember that was probably one of the most overlooked, it was even earlier than that. One of the most overlooked launches. That launch happened and people were like, meh, whatever. And here, look at what happened. We're in 2024, and in 2023, the Model Y, as Joe would say, the Yesla is literally the #1 car in the EU, if not the world. But this is just, and what's crazy too for the EU specifically is this is the first time an electric vehicle has ever achieved this title. So, Tesla is paving the way for sustainability on every ground, but just huge news to see this. Any thoughts on this? I mean, I think we've been really talking about this. It feels like for the past 4 months, just because this, you're hearing Tesla or the Model Y is the best-selling car every month for the past literally 10 months.
I love the Yesla branding. I think that's amazing. Joe, if that's you should trademark it. I think I don't think we would have thought this. They started shipping the first 1,000 cars first quarter of 2020. I think we ever would have thought that a couple of years later, not only be the #1 EV, but the #1 selling car in the world. When you sit in one, you drive one, you understand right away. And I've owned a Model Y Performance before, and just in 10 seconds, it's a wonderful experience. And I paid a whole lot more for it at the time, and I was able to sell it. And when I moved up into a Model X with no issue, but it's just such a phenomenal car at the price point it's at right now. and then you have all the incentives that have been layered on over the last year. In Europe, and now we've got better leasing terms that have occurred over the last couple of days and new pricing. So it's a challenging environment still. It's challenging for consumers, and and so in this time, I think it's be interesting to see how Europe reacts in the first quarter and the first half of this year to new pricing and new leasing.
So it looks like every January we're just going to have like FUD stories. Is that? I mean, it's like literally, I think for like the past like 5 years, every early January there's like this craziness that happens. So here we are, Chicago, cold. Keep in mind, people, that it's also cold in Canada. It's also cold in Buffalo. It's also cold everywhere else. And these cars have been around for years and not had any problems. This seems like really a location specific thing that might have had something with that specific charger. I don't know. Jeff lives in Chicago, so
yeah,
I would really love your feedback, Jeff.
Yeah, and this is still getting a lot. I mean, even it's being repeated and recycled. Even in this morning's news cycle, it's everywhere. I went to wash my car yesterday, and the car wash attendant says, is your battery okay? Are you gonna be okay? Like, is everything working okay? I saw the news, and I'm like, yeah, it's my 10th winter driving these things. They're wonderful. So yeah, it really briefly what happened, like something actually happened, like motorists were actually stranded in reality. I mean, so reporters were called out and motorists were interviewed, and the way that kind of this, so we were fudded, but there was also, the summary is we are fudded. We are being fudded today and every day about this topic, but there was something that happened, and there is kind of a go forward takeaway of like, how do you make yourself more resilient to this situation so you're not put in it. Because on the one hand, when I tell people like, what's it like driving a Tesla in the winter, I said, from a traction, it's the best vehicle I've actually ever driven in the winter in terms of performance on snow and ice, and it's fantastic. But there you have to manage your how you charge the vehicle and how you approach the whole the whole approach to charging and range during the winter, because there is some impact. Now, I will tell you, as being an owner for 10 years, that impact is actually minimized and gotten a lot better, especially with the advent of the heat pump so the performance of the car is good. But in this situation, what looks like what happened is there were some so there's hundreds of Tesla OEM charging stalls in the Chicago area, hundreds. I did a couple of independent samples of 15 to 20 charging stations, about 150 to 200 slots. And at various points in time, these Tesla chargers are up in they post the metrics, 99.95% uptime. And during these mega cold snaps, negative temperatures, I was taking a couple of snaps. Okay, what happened? Is there a huge issue? And basically about 90% of the slots that I looked at were self-reported as being up. And I went and drove to this specific charger. Now, I went a day plus out from the actual news stations being there. But when I went there, actually that morning, they said 2 of the 8 stalls were out at this charger. And by the time I got there, all 8 were functioning and fine. 5 cars were charging. I actually tried charging on 3 myself. There wasn't I was expecting to see like a pileup of cars just stranded everywhere. And there was, I think, 1, possibly 2 cars that obviously would need to be, charged. And so the media is taking it and running with this, basically saying like, you can't own an EV in cold temps. And the Joe's intro of like, there's many cities in the world that are extremely cold. There's probably millions, multiple now of millions of Teslas operating in these cold temperatures. You just have a different profile for how you deal with this situation in very cold temps versus how you deal with it in the summertime or the springtime. And once you do that, I've never had an issue, charging my vehicle, going to a supercharger, and then just, again, they're widely available and they work. Even at negative temperatures, they work. But you have to do a couple of things. One is you have to precondition your car. All you have to do is navigate to the supercharger. The car will precondition. That duration of time it takes to precondition is a function of the temperature of your battery and the ambient temperature outside, and how much energy you're actually out. What are you doing actually with the car? So if you remember those things, and you remember that you have to have a little bit more of a guard man in charge, you'll be fine. So what I think happened here is a number of new users, plenty of new Uber drivers, plenty of new just owners of Teslas. And, so I think there's it may have been a lot of people's first winters where they arrived at the charging station, did not precondition their car, went to go plug it in and said, you're at the min charge level. So you're at the min temperature level, car needs to warm up to charge. And they're like, okay, the charger doesn't work. The car's not working. So long story short, I think there is a teaching moment here. There may be some additional resiliency to kind of, I don't use the term idiot proof because I don't think these people are idiots or anybody's an idiot, but like, how do you make the software, how do you make the user experience more resilient so consumers don't have to even, not to say think about it, but it'll work for everybody. Because now we're in this EV adoption phase where we're going from, single digit percentages to now double digit percentages, and you're getting a much wider swath of the population.
Yeah, I think we're past the day and ages where, most Tesla owners, when they got their first Tesla, they would really educate themselves, because for them, it was, a big purchase. It was something that they would literally just do their best to understand every aspect. And so probably before they would go to the snow, obviously you living in an area where there's just snow every year, but you would have people who would actually spend the time to potentially, figure out the ins and outs of that. But in California, we have like Tahoe, Mammoth, and some other places where you can go for snow. But you can spend, watch a quick 10-minute video and then kind of be prepped for what to expect there. But a lot of the new owners coming today, we're going to hit well over 2 million vehicles delivered this year. Potentially, we're in between 6 million cars total Teslas have been delivered across the world. And so it's just one of those things where we're now hitting mass volumes of people. And it's just about education. But again, if you look at Norway, that's probably the biggest Tesla per capita based on the country size. That's it's pretty much the number one car there. And, I've spent some time with the Norway Club. They have large events in these freezing temps, and Teslas do really well out there. But they're also probably very well educated on, how to have an electric vehicle in very, very cold temps. Austria is one. Again, you could take a lot of the European countries and who had Teslas in the winter. And as Joe was saying, whether it's Canada, whether it's Buffalo, other places, owners have had Teslas in those areas, and you don't hear much about it. But anytime you can show a Tesla that's literally either in flames or, standing, a Tesla in a supercharger line, it's just going to trigger a bunch of people. Same thing if you post a video of people waiting in line for Costco gas. It's just something that is going to do really well. Even if you give 10% truth in the narrative, people are going to jump onto that.
Yeah. One more quick thing there. I hosted a space on this, and we had a couple of participants in the space. One person said they did encounter, chargers down here or there. Some of the owners forums reported a complete outage of one site. So there were, during the time when it was -10, -15, there were issues. What I tried to do is just go in. It's like, well, it's saying like there's a problem. Well, I try to use kind of my background to understand all right, there's about 90,000 Teslas on the road. I sampled about 200 chargers. Now I did it at negative temperatures, but at various points in time. But the point is it's not like it's really important to quantify a situation. Just understand, what is the real experience going to be for people? The real experience is 90% of the slots were mostly up. And if there was an outage, it must have been measured in hours. And it's been my experience too in the Chicago area. If a certain slot is down, usually hours later or the next day, it's repaired and it's up and going. In fact, when I drove to the Oak Brook supercharger, the famous one, while I was there, Model S zoomed up. It was one of the supercharger techs zoomed up, and he went connector to connector. he did some PM work and he was just checking out different things. And again, all 8 of 8 were up. But so something did happen. There were outages reported. But what I tried to do is just like quantify, like, 90% of them are up. People can charge. There's probably an opportunity, though, to through education. And really, what I've found in my experience in doing this in product is you really have to get it into the product. And you really got to be able to alert consumers. You can't just say, go look in the manual. It tells you to precondition. You've got to figure out how to get it even more and more front and center in front of users of what to do during wintertime.
Yeah, actually, that could be really interesting, right? Like, let's say you're about to charge and you're you're about to go to bed. Maybe it's like 8 or 9 o'clock and you get a notification. You have 25% left on your battery. You're going to wake up with a projected 5% or whatever it is. Like, you should charge before you go to bed, or things like little indicators that are informative and help educate. But I think that's really helpful. Alexandra, were you going to say something?
I agree. But I just want to point out 2 things. First of all, good job of Jeff all week to keep us updated. He went there in the morning, checking them out. He did a long space in the afternoon, in the early evening, where lots of people participated for hours discussing that. So that was a great thing, which brings me to the point that thank God we have X, because the FUD is just relentless right now. As you said, John, the current FUD is the cold weather. It will be a Cybertruck stuck in the forest. It will go on and on and on. And thanks to X, there are rebuttals. Thanks to X, there's dialogue. In the case of Jeff, I witnessed a dialogue between him and an anchor of the local Chicago TV station, who is a Tesla owner as well, and who, publicly on X said, yeah, they're making too much out of it. We have to control a little bit the narrative. It's out of hand again. So that dialogue between participants, real journalists, real anchors, and us and so many other people, that's what's happening on X. Those spaces where for hours people educate each other, discuss how, they do it in their location, what's their experience, what would be a good idea. That's why X is so valuable. That's not else anymore. And it just, all these people saying, oh, he should have not bought Twitter. Believe me, there are already so many benefits to Twitter, and there's much more to X, and there's so much more to come. And this is one of them.
Great point.
Yeah, I feel like we could, especially we're seeing a lot of the benefits from X specifically that are happening. This platform is hitting all-time highs. What they're rolling out in the past year, the capabilities. I can do video calling. I think I can even video call Joe now. He's got an Android, so he had to wait, I think, almost a whole year. But that's kind of a joke. But I was like, hey, the new feature came out on
Android. Android's cool.
Kind of. But I was like trying to call Joe. I was like, dude, we need to I need to call you. And then it's like he's like, oh, I have an Android. I was like, all right, I had to go find someone with an iPhone. But sorry about that Android hate right there. All that to say is there's so many benefits, in my opinion, to having X. It's going to benefit Tesla and really all the companies. You're seeing even SpaceX not do their live streams on YouTube anymore. And Mr. Beast just posted his first video ever. Again, we could go on for days about this, but I'm really excited to see these benefits. And it's because of things like X, where you can connect with people, get the right information, get rebuttals, different opinions, especially on all of this controversy with the superchargers in Chicago. So I think it's one of the best and flattest platforms to be able to connect with people, which leads us into, it'll be really interesting to see the China coverage on the Cybertruck. I thought, and this happened from feedback on X. I think it's shout out to, was it Ray from Los Angeles area? I've met him one time at an In-N-Out, great guy, but it was just funny. He posted, and next thing you know, there's a whole tour of the Cybertruck coming to China. And this is going to be huge. I think just branding and really taking this truck around the country. And I would not be surprised. You've seen some lines, especially for some of the products Tesla's released in China. This is going to have huge lines, if not hours long. But it looks like it might even be lottery. So I don't know exactly how it'll happen. But this is I'm personally really excited about it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and sorry, Joe.
Oh, okay. Yep, real quick. Sorry, Jeff. So I think more than not, this is a technology showcase for Tesla, as opposed, you know what I mean? Because there's more going on internally with the Cybertruck than externally. Like Elon said, it's going to be hard to get it regulated there, but the technology that's in it is, I think, is what they're really going to try and showcase and let people know about. Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to comment on that point, Joe. The regulators. I actually don't know. I mean, I'd be interested to do some research on like what would be the barriers. You know, there are some really unique and bizarre looking vehicles on the road in China. I've worked, there extensively, over my career. And, if you look at the delivery and the freight vehicles and the different sizes and how they kind of navigate through these weird portions of the road, like they figure it out and they're pretty good at it. Now, I think if you put hundreds of thousands of these on the road, I think that's what the regulators may be a little bit concerned about. But it's again, it's not like there's not some pretty odd shaped or larger vehicles on the road in China. There absolutely are. So I'll be interested to, I don't doubt what Tesla and Elon are saying, just be interested to understand it better and kind of, is there a path? Hopefully they wouldn't have to retool, anything that you can copy as much of the tooling as possible and bring it over. Cause that would be a huge, not a huge, but it would be a significant R&D effort to retool a product just to miniaturize it. But if there's a market for that, maybe, but I'd be interested to understand why they can't get that through regulators. Cause a lot of weird stuff on the road in China.
Yeah, I think it was even you, people you mentioned in Europe about getting it into Europe, like as far as, or was it, it was maybe the Escalade. There's like an Escalade specifically in Europe. And I forgot if it was you, Jeff, it was one of your posts about that. But long story short, that thing is as heavy, if not heavier than the Cybertruck. And, were regulators worried about crashes when that thing released? No, it's just, it would be, in my opinion, it'd be awesome to see this truck potentially in Europe, even in China. Obviously, I don't know if they would make a right-hand drive. It's just the volume does not make sense, in my opinion. But, depending on if they can get some of these in the country, I think it would do, it would do fairly well, in my opinion. But what do I know?
And just to close off, by the way, if I'm in Tesla's position, I don't think geographical expansion is a priority for the Cybertruck, because they have so much demand in their first launch region, more than they can actually build at any one point in time. So this isn't so much a priority but as much as just answering to like consumers' wants and just like, and getting that visibility out there. So when supply does get to demand equilibrium and you get those two balance, then you really want to be, in advance driving that, geographical expansion. But it's not the priority today for Cybertruck. For geographical expansion, the priority really is FSD. In my opinion. But anyway, yeah, that's just a comment on what I think the priorities may be.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. All right, so the next part, this is kind of some already news, but it's really, maybe we could talk a little bit potentially about price drops. Alexandra, you mentioned a lot about that earlier, but point of sale rebate, you can literally go to the Tesla sales center and get $7,500 off if you qualify based on your income. And you can buy Model 3 Performance, again, not the Highland, long range, Model X, and then all of the Model Ys. But I think there was one other slide as well, some more price cuts in Germany that are happening in Germany and France. So, these cars continue to just get cheaper as production becomes more efficient. But what do you think about these specifically, whether it's the point of sale or potentially these price cuts, and really price cuts this year? What are the thoughts on this?
So real quick, I'll say, because I went to Tesla last night and talked to the sales reps. So the point of sale is exactly that. It happens after all totals have been evaluated. It's not like you can't use this as part of your down payment or anything like that. It's your down payment, the total comes out, and then the $7,500 comes off of the total purchase price of the vehicle. So they wanted to really make that clear, because there was people were wondering like, oh, well, can I use this as part of the down payment? Like, no, you can't. It's whatever your total purchase price is. It comes off of that. So I think that's a good point. And also, income does factor into it. If you make too much, seems like if you make too much, you're out of luck anyways. But I think the battery with the Highland is going to be interesting to see what they can do when that comes out and what their motivations are going forward for any other incentives. Because wasn't there also like an extra $2,000 for being an Uber driver? That's another slide. Sorry, but I'll let somebody else go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll just comment quickly.
I just want to add quickly on the European stuff. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Alexandra. The floor.
You want me to go first? Okay. Yeah. I just want to comment quickly on the European stuff because I got a message this morning from somebody who went yesterday to a Tesla store and ordered his new Tesla. He already had a long range Y and he got a supplementary 3, I don't know what. And so it was 0% leasing now and the price cuts. They had yesterday the biggest sales day both in Germany and in Europe ever after these price cuts. That was communicated clearly from the store people to my contact. So this is working. I mean, when I hear people arguing that this is margin, they don't take into account the economies on cost of goods sold, and they never take into account that there are more cars sold. It's just it drives me crazy when we hear all that. No, I'm not on Starlink. I wish I would have changed it this morning. I don't know what it is. I'm really sorry. I hope it works better next week.
Yeah, no worries. I think I love that. That's like real time on the ground input, from Alexandra. And I was just going to add to these pricing moves. And I don't want to get too detailed or too wonky or too lengthy, but if you look at there's this allergy to like what's happening with pricing over the last year or so at Tesla, and it's really a tale of different halves. So in the first half of last year, there was I would call it almost a correction of pricing, not just like adjustments. It was a wholesale correction of like, we need to, in order to get to this volume threshold or this shelf, and based on what's happening with commodity deflation, we got to move our our pricing down. And what people look at is like, okay, what happened is now you have this gross margin compression. So this is a problem. So now what people equate to is every time Tesla moves any price, any level of any magnitude, it's immediately cut the EPS, cut the gross margins. And if you look at the first half of last year, those were gigantic moves. Over 10% of the MSRP was coming down in a 4-month period. There is no procurement, no COGS deflation program that's going to be able to keep up with that kind of pricing correction. So what happened is pricing came down much faster than Tesla could reduce costs at that period of time. And then you had gross margin compression. Now, when you look at Tesla's history, I've looked at a couple of different 4-quarter snapshots of their reported COGS. Troy's reported this data out, and this is the data I actually looked at. And I've looked at multiple 4-quarter snapshots, and they've demonstrated an ability to do anywhere from 8 to 10% COGS reductions annualized. And this is with all this noise in the system, with inflationary input pricing, with bringing Austin and Berlin online, with all that noise. So if you start stripping out all that noise, they're actually capable of even more. But if you just assume and you just look at what Tesla's actually done and not just put a bunch of different assumptions on top of it, the point of what I'm saying is what they've done since April of last year on pricing are much, much smaller pricing moves. And that's why you saw the change in gross margin quarter to quarter. We had that big drop off after the first quarter, and then the second quarter with the other pricing move. And then you saw the gross margin, the moves just started to get very much smaller. So now what's happening is they're reducing pricing at the same rate or about the same rate, I believe. And what they're showing is what they can actually do in their own cost structure to build a vehicle. So in the example you posted there about Europe, I think it's really important for the viewers to understand you have to look at those pricing moves. So it was a 6% pricing move, and Europe is 11% of the volume globally. That's a 0.66% change then in the the global MSRP of the product. Tesla, from their cost perspective, I mean, the data shows that they've in 4 quarters continuous, they do about 2% reduction per quarter. So this is a 0.66% reduction out of Europe, aggregate across all the volume, and then the China stuff I believe is about 0.5 or 0.6%. The point is that as long as they're keeping pricing, they're reducing pricing at a lower rate, then they're actually able to reduce COGS. They'll be able to do COGS a little bit of a higher rate of reduction. You're not going to see as much gross margin or any gross margin compression anymore. I'm not guaranteeing that. I don't know what Tesla's going to do in the future, but you have to analyze each of these changes. And the point is they're not doing these wholesale corrections, very small pricing changes, and the COGS reductions continuing. Also, PPI has gone deflationary in the last couple of cycles, both in China and in the US. So now you've got input pricing coming down as well. And then you have Tesla's own action. So I believe Tesla's actually catching up from a COGS reduction perspective relative to the pricing moves. And I think they'll continue to do pricing moves in the future to make their vehicles more affordable. But the point is their supply chain is now, I believe, at a pace where they're keeping up. Again, unless they do something wholesale differently in the future, they've really, I think the two have caught up, pricing and COGS. They've caught up over the last couple of quarters.
Well, as Tesla has always mentioned, right? They're trying to make volume and sell units. It's not really it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, the COGS is part of it, but they're really trying to just make sure that if you want one, you can get one type of deal. And so I imagine that going forward, and that kind of leads into the next thing with the hope.
Hold on, I have one quick question for Jeff, but we'll definitely end with where you're headed. But one question that I have for Jeff is, would you say, based on what you've been seeing over the past year and a half, with obviously their margin coming down from that like 20% and 20 plus percent into like the high teens, would you say that even with these price cuts, would you, based off of your expertise, would you say that the margin's the percentage is just gonna keep going down even as or do you think that they'll probably be able to hold given the pricing kind of catching up with some of the COGS reductions and efficiencies?
Yeah. The kind of the one sentence response is I believe that their ability to reduce cost and the rate that they're reducing price are now in equilibrium. So it's at a minimum. It should flatline here, but we don't know. Like it's January 19th. If they come out 2 weeks from now and they realize that they have to do more moves on pricing, well, then you have to go constantly back and reassess the situation. But what I think is incorrect is just to take a pricing move and analyze it in isolation and say that they don't actually reduce their cost structure while they're reducing pricing, because that's just not the case. But again, it's a tale of two halves. I think people look at the earnings reports like, wow, Jeff or anybody, like the gross margins came down last year. So what you're saying is not true. No, what I'm saying is they had a price correction in the first half of last year, and no normal supply chain or COGS reduction. Remember, COGS is cost of goods sold. It's everything that's needed to build a vehicle in aggregate. So there's no COGS reduction program that would keep up with the price corrections they did in the January to April timeframe last year. But what they've done since then are very small moves. And then if you study the auto industry and you study consumer electronics, actually, most procurement organizations, and this varies with different macroeconomic conditions, but most of them believe that they can drive anywhere from 1.5 to even upwards of 3% COGS reduction per quarter in terms of deflation. So this is what supply chains do, and this is what engineering teams and supply chains do. They go after this. So the short answer to your question is that they should be able to keep up, but let's see what they do for the rest of the quarter in terms of pricing moves.
I'll pass the baton to close out, Joe, with one last major story.
Yeah, so we have Tesla and Uber. I titled this a love story because they've been partnering up with different things all over the time. But yeah, Jeff had made this post and on Sawyer's post, and I mean, it all makes sense, right? It's just like what you're looking at is, like I was saying, like Tesla's just trying to get vehicles into the hands of people who are trying to get them. And this, to me, this just speaks to a lot of the demand issues and all that type of thing that people love to shout about. But as we see on every instance, people are trying to get these vehicles. Some people can't get them and they really want them. My cousin just got one this weekend. Like, people are at every point trying to get a vehicle, and especially for Uber drivers and people in the gig economy, like, it just makes way more sense for them to have an EV. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be a Tesla, but it's good for them to have the options for the 3 and the Y at an extra discount on top of the $7,500 that they could potentially get on a vehicle, or $4,000 if it's used under 25. So there's just incentives all over the place. It's pretty wild.
One last thought on, the incentives you're just talking about, and potentially, I think even some of the stuff Jeff was talking about. How much, if at all, because the Model Y is obviously the best-selling car in the world. They just released the Highland Model 3. Do you think even with these reductions, let me look at this. Even with these reductions, on the Model Y in Germany, it was 4 to 8%, and then in France from 5 to 7%. And I think we've talked a little bit about this, that most people probably aren't informed like us, that know that this Model 3 Highland is here, and the Model Y is kind of outdated now. Do you think that's going to have a big impact or cause much headwinds this year?
I don't. I think we're in a bubble when it comes to information overload when it comes to Tesla. So I think we see these things, and we saw this with the Model S refresh. People were buying them up, and nobody was disappointed. Yeah, a few of the fanboy types that were really trying to get it in at the $69,420 price, and then realized that just a few months later, like there was the Plaid that came out in the full refresh or whatever. But that was a few people. Other than that, the greater margin of people who got their vehicles are very satisfied with it. Yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah, and the new Model 3 is a better vehicle than the one it's replacing. It's got the ventilated seats, it's got the rear screen, it's got all the added comfort. So I can see as a consumer why I would be paying a little bit more to get into that. So I think there's people concerned about, the Model 3 is going to be more expensive, without the incentives and so forth. And I think you're going to look at that vehicle and say, wow, they've really upgraded it. And there's a reason I would be paying more, because I'm actually getting these additional things that I won't be able to get in the current Model Y. So I think it'll be fine.
Definitely. Well, thank you both again. And Alexandra, shout out to Alexandra. It sounds like, Santa Barbara's having some pretty hefty weather issues maybe. So hopefully she'll be back next week without any issues. So thank you for bearing with us on that. But we're super excited to have her as a regular weekly host with us. I did post her description and Twitter handle on X, and also in YouTube. So make sure you give her a follow, along with Jeff and Cybertruckless. Make sure to patronize them. And thank you again, both of you, and Alexandra, for your time this week for another great episode. So we'll see you all next Friday.
Thank you.